Hi everyone, this is Jessica with K&A Greenhouse in Madison. I'm going to go over a presentation on privacy hedges and hedgerows. This is a question we actually get quite a bit in the nursery yard at both locations, and it seems especially since 2020 when more people were home and then they realized that they kind of wanted to create their own space in their backyards or even along the lot lines. Some people will go so far as to say, I don't like my neighbors, so I need to plant something to create that, the block between the two properties. So this presentation will hopefully give you some good ideas on what you can plant. I'll have some tried and true that you probably are going to be familiar with once you see the photos. And I have quite a few of the flowering deciduous types as well, just because sometimes people don't want evergreens. They would like to have something more flowering and pretty with a little bit more interest than just an evergreen tree. So with that said, let's get started. Okay, so first let's go over what makes a good hedge plant or privacy plant. First thing is you need it to be dense. Either as you can see here in this photo, the arborvitae have a very dense growing habit, so it creates a very nice living fence. If it is a deciduous or flowering plant, you want the twigs to be very thick. You don't want something that has a very open habit, just because then what's the point of having it as a fence if you can see through it? So you need something that's going to be dense growing habit. Like I say here, evergreen is best just because you have that year round, and here in Wisconsin we seem to have winter that stretches longer and longer. As I'm looking out my windows, and it's 9 inches of snow outside on April 3rd, so you just never know how long winter's going to last, when the plants are actually going to leaf out. So the second thing that you want to look for is a fast growing plant. It'll fill in a lot faster for you. It'll be, it won't be an instant fence, but ideally it will fill in and get tall and wide and thick within a few years. And along those lines, you also want it to be at least 6 feet tall, just because most people tend to be right around 6 feet. If you're like me, you're shorter than that, so you can't see above that anyway, unless you're on a step stool. So generally speaking, I'm going to have things in here that will be 6 feet or a lot taller than that. Some things will be 15 feet, some will be 10 feet. So just to give you plenty of options, let's get going. Okay, so the first plant that I have here is a dogwood. We have a lot of different varieties of dogwoods that we do sell. Some of them are a dwarf variety, like you want to stay away from the Arctic Fire Red and Arctic Fire Yellows, just because those are going to be shorter. But here we have a lot of red twig varieties. The yellow twig varieties you can see in the left-hand photo has both varieties there. Generally speaking, they tend to be a minimum of 6 feet tall. They do tend to get a lot taller if you don't prune them. The other option is a gray dogwood, which gets quite a bit taller and wider. That's what's seen in the photo up above my picture here, my video. Usually they all have green leaves. The one exception to that is one called Ivory Halo. That one will have a variegated leaf too, so that gives you just a little bit more interest. And then in the winter, you'll have the red twigs or the yellow twigs if you get one of those. The gray dogwood is basically a gray twig, so it doesn't have a lot of winter interest, but again, it'll be, usually the gray dogwoods will be, I'd say, around 10 feet tall. If you have walnut trees, though, these do not grow under them. They're on a lot of lists as being tolerant, but I've tried to plant them, and usually they get smaller every year, and they tend to last maybe 3 years for me. So definitely not walnut tolerant, so you'd have to avoid this if that's what you have. But otherwise, a great option. They do get really thick. They have a nice winter interest. They have fall color. Usually it's a red or burgundy color. They get white flowers in spring. They'll have the berries that the birds adore. So it's kind of an all-around great shrub. The next one it's a hedge cotoneaster, and it's even in the name. So you have to know it's going to be a good plant for a hedge. Not to be confused with other cotoneaster plants. And just as a side note, yes, cotoneaster is the proper way to say it. A lot of people think it's cottoneaster, and actually that is how I thought it was pronounced until my forestry professor who had been a landscape designer the first part of his career, then he became a professor at Stevens Point. He corrected us, all of us in the class, and said cotoneaster is actually the proper way to say this name. So anyway, don't want to plant cranberry cotoneaster. You don't want to plant tom thumb. We have one called Northern Borders also that we have in that has a variegated leaf, but all of those are going to be too short. So you'll be very disappointed if you see tom thumb growing 2 feet tall and you wanted it to be a hedge. So this is the only cotoneaster that we sell that makes a good hedge plant. You can see the photo again right above me. A nice thick hedge. It has green leaves in the summer, but then it does get the orange-red fall color. The flowers you don't really see. That's actually what's pictured on the bottom left there. It's a very pale pink bud that opens up to a white flower, but they're very small. And they do get berries on them, just not as showy as the cranberry cotoneaster will have, so don't expect, huge red crabapple sized berries. But as I said, it grows fast. This one tends to be at least 6 feet tall, but usually if you don't, keep pruning it shorter, it will get a little bit taller than that as well. Okay, so the next one is Forsythia. The variety that I am going to be talking about is called Northern Gold. There are a few other varieties on the market. I think Meadowlark may be one of the taller varieties. I should caution you that you don't want to plant Gold Tide. For the same reason you don't want to plant Cranberry cotoneaster. Gold Tide is going to be about 3 feet tall, so that's not going to make a great hedge. It's a beautiful plant, but just not a good hedge plant. Northern Gold, on the other hand, is a very large plant. My husband and I have it planted along our driveway because the previous owners put it there just kind of to block off, basically put where the edge of the driveway is. So there's 3 of them there, and right now they're about 7 feet tall, 6-7 feet, depending on which one you're looking at. They can get up to even 8 feet tall if you just leave them. Don't bother pruning them. As you can see in all of the photos here, they get a very beautiful yellow flower in really early spring before the leaves even come out. So mine are actually flowering right now on April 3rd. However, that's very unusual. It's the only year in the last 11 years that I've lived here that they've flowered this early. Generally speaking, they tend to start flowering at the end of April. So right around April 25th is about when I start to see them flower. And then once they're done flowering, they will get green leaves. So it's nothing really showy for the rest of the spring or summer months. But in the fall, it gets, again, a burgundy fall color, so you get that nice show before they lose their leaves. And these are very thick plants. I can attest to that, having them along my driveway. You honestly won't be able to see very much through them, especially if you plant them really close together like that left-hand photo is there. All right, so panicle hydrangea. Again, you're going to have to make sure that you get the correct variety. There are so many panicle hydrangeas on the market. All of the panicle hydrangeas prefer full sun to part shade, so you don't have to worry about that. Generally, hedges are going to be in a full sun location, so I do pretty much just have full sun plants here unless I say otherwise. So panicle hydrangeas, there's a lot of varieties that are now on the market being marketed as dwarf varieties, so they'll be 2-3 feet tall. Some of them are 4 to 5 feet tall. There's quite a few that are larger. So some options would be Limelight, Limelight Prime. There's Quickfire. All of those are Pinky Winky. They're all going to be about 6 to 8 feet tall. There's a couple of varieties that are going to be 5 or 6 feet tall that you could probably get away with if you don't prune it much, other than cutting off the brown flower heads. But there's quite a few panicle hydrangeas. I tend to even get the bigger ones in just for the reason of I've had a lot of people plant these just as a hedge. I know a lot of people like the dwarf varieties, but if you have a line of different types of panicle hydrangeas, you can extend the bloom season. Like Quickfire tends to bloom first, and then you can put in Limelight that will bloom a little bit later in the season, or Pinky Winky that's kind of in the middle. So it just really makes a nice show, and then you have that color all season long. And again, they do get pretty thick. I have I am pushing the boundaries at my house. They don't like walnut trees, but I have a spot close enough to the house that I planted a vanilla strawberry, and it doesn't totally think that it's the best spot for it because I'm sure the walnut roots probably extend about that far, but it is still a fairly thick plant, and it's doing okay at my house. So just don't plant it really close to walnuts because again, it won't come back after about 2 or 3 years. But if you don't have walnut trees, nothing to really worry about. And privet has been around for a very long time as a hedge plant. My grandma actually has a different type of privet, not straight talk. She has, I believe she has Cheyenne privets at her house, and it's along the back of her property, and she has it back there because the neighbor that butts up to her property has just a pile of stuff in their backyard, like a broken boat and some random tires and just all kinds of stuff that they don't need anymore, but they just don't want to bring it to the dump and do anything about it. So they have her looking at it. So she planted the privet. And even in the winter, she can't really see the pile that she doesn't want to see. So this particular variety is called Straight Talk. It is very tall and more skinny, so you are going to need more of these than you would some of the other varieties I'm going over, just because it doesn't get very wide. But it is bred to be very thick, so you can't see through the branches, and again, tall enough that it would make a really nice hedge. This one doesn't really flower. I mean, it does, privets do flower, but they're not really known for their flower, and it's not eye-catching at all, so you don't plant this for that reason. The leaves on it, some people get confused and think that it's a boxwood because the leaves are so very similar to a boxwood or an inkberry, but this one will lose its leaves. The boxwoods don't. So this one you will have it lose its leaves in October, and then it'll, releaf again in spring. And nine bark is always kind of a go-to for almost anything in the landscape. There are some shorter ones that are coming on the market now. It used to be just a lot of the taller varieties like Diablo, Summer Wine. There's a couple of new varieties coming that I had last year called Sweet Cherry Tea, and then some other ones from Bailey Nurseries that they're breeding, which are also short. But Diablo and Summer Wine, definitely taller varieties. There's Amber Jubilee if you don't like the purple foliage. So Amber Jubilee comes out a very bright orange and yellow. And I actually put some of my daffodils next to them because when the daffodils bloom yellow, or I have some that are yellow with an orange cup, they start blooming around the same time that the nine bark starts to come out. So it kind of accents each other. Either way, you'll have the colorful foliage. They do flower white in June, and then they'll get kind of red, papery seed heads on them that the birds do eat. And in the fall, they also change to, again, an orange color. So you'll have that 3 seasons of interest. Nine barks also have kind of a peeling bark, almost like a birch tree does. So that gives it a little bit more winter interest than just, brown or gray sticks. These grow very fast, and they're also very drought tolerant once they've gotten established. Their root system's, good to go after about 3 seasons or so. So again, this is a beautiful plant. You can prune it however you want to. Generally speaking, you don't want to take off a third, more than a third of what's the size of the plant. So if it's 3 feet tall, you don't want to take off more than a foot. But they do take pruning well. You can keep them a little bit more contained if they start to get a little wild. But these, again, because they grow so fast, they have a lot of twigs that just kind of crisscross and make that shield for you, make a great hedge. And of course, there's always the option of willow. Not thinking about a weeping willow tree here, but we have a couple of varieties of willow shrubs that we've been selling for a few years. There's the Arctic Blue. It's it's listed as a dwarf Arctic Blue, but it still gets 6 to 8, sometimes even 10 feet tall. So I guess it's dwarf in terms of not being a weeping willow tree. Another option is a pussy willow, which will get 10 to 15 feet tall. There's the nishiki or the dappled willow, which is the one right above me here in the photos. So there's a lot of different options that you can do that will all be minimum of 6 feet tall, definitely closer probably to 8 or 10 feet tall. And most of the willows are going to have that kind of very airy appearance. So if it's windy, it just kind of, it's like an ornamental grass where it moves with the wind, gives that movement in your landscape as well. The Nishiki willow is the one that has the green, white, and pink leaves, hence the name dappled willow. The Arctic blue is kind of a up close. It has like a blue-green leaf. It's very fine. And then the new growth is a maroon color, so that gives a little bit of extra. And then, of course, the pussy willow has the little soft flowers on it in the spring that the bees adore. The pussy willow is not going to be as airy as the other two, so when it's windy, it's not going to move as much. But the Arctic blue and the Nishiki willows will definitely do that. These are not drought tolerant like the 9-barks are, so you will need to make sure that these get enough water, especially the first 3 years when you're planting them. Otherwise, you'll see, you know, the twigs will die back about yay much every year until, you know, they do get established and then start getting enough water. The other thing, these do prefer full sun. They can handle a little bit of shade. They do not like walnut trees either, so I'm not allowed to have these on my property. These are not on a list as being juglone tolerant, but they're also not on the listing. They're not juglone tolerant, so of course I had to push the boundaries and see what happens, and they did not come back. So willows are also a no-no if you have walnut trees around your property. And this one here is actually what I grew up with along the side of our driveway. My neighbors growing up really liked lilacs, so they actually put a hedge between our garage and their house, so they didn't have to look at the side of our garage. And they just put the common purple and the common white lilacs, and every spring, of course, you can smell the lilacs for a couple of weeks while they were flowering. Be careful again with these. There are some shorter varieties out there now, like Baby Kim, 3 feet tall, not going to make a great hedge. Stick closer to the old-fashioned lilacs. Miss Kim should be okay-ish. That one tends to get about 6 feet tall, but if you do the old-fashioned common white, common purple, there's Sensation that has a purple flower that has a white edge around the flower. There's Charles Jolly. There's just a lot of different varieties that you can pick from that will be 8, 10, 12, even 15 feet tall. And again, they smell heavenly in spring. Take it from someone who grew up with that along the property line where she lives. And again, of course, lilacs flower in spring, and then they don't really do much in the summer. So photo above me, that's pretty much what it's going to look like when it's getting done flowering. You can see a few flowers on there yet, but it's not going to look like the photo on the left there. Probably more than for about 2 or 3 weeks in the spring, and then it's just green for the rest of the summer. They don't even really get much fall color. Sometimes it'll be yellow, but really don't count on them for a lot of fall color either. We could do a couple of different options of viburnum. There's arrowwood viburnum, which are the 2 photos on the left-hand side. There's cranberry bush viburnum that's on the right-hand side, closer to me. Both of them will get kind of a lace cap white flower in spring. The arrowwood viburnum gets blueberries, and I should comment, they don't actually get blueberries like edible blueberries. They get berries that are navy blue in color. Edible to birds, not to humans. The cranberry bush viburnum will get those clusters of red berries that you can see in the photo there. They also both get either a bright red or a burgundy red fall color. They're more versatile than most of the other plants that I've been listing. These will grow best in full sun, but they will also tolerate full shade. So just note that if you do put it in full shade, they will be a lot more leggy, so they probably wouldn't make a great hedge. And another note for these two, if you plant either one of them and you want the berries, you have to plant 2 different varieties to pollinate each other, because if all you plant are blue muffin arrowwood viburnums, you will not get them cross-pollinating, so you will not get the berries. You'll only get the flowers and the fall color and all that stuff. But if you do want the berries, you'll have to plant like 1 blue muffin, and then you'll have to plant another variety, such as, I'm trying to think of what we also have. There's Chicago Luster that is sometimes out there. We have 3 or 4 different varieties. Red Feather, I believe, is the one that was bred here in Wisconsin. Um, just make sure that you watch the heights, because there are some that are starting to come on the market with viburnum as well that are shorter. So they'll be 4 or 5 feet tall. So you'll have an 8-foot tall plant and a 4-foot tall plant, and people will be able to see right onto your property. There are other viburnums on the market. Like the Korean spice, I adore Korean spice viburnum, but they are not that thick, so they don't make a great hedge. Whereas these 2 varieties here, they have more of a dense habit. Therefore, even in the winter, the twigs will really, make that nice living fence. All right, now we're on to the evergreens. This is by far the plant that we sell the most of when people would like a living fence, when they want privacy, when they want a screen. Arborvitae, there are so many varieties on the market. There's a couple of varieties that are going to be shorter, like I believe Technito and maybe even Holmstrup are going to be a little bit too short. However, there's Rushmore, there's Hetz Wintergreen, there's Techni if you want fat. There's skinny ones like the Emerald Green. I have Northern Spire. There's North Pole. There's just so many different varieties that are tall, skinny, that make a great hedge. Because they're evergreen, you'll have that year round. You don't have to worry about how dense the twigs are inside. Just to make sure that you watch, you can see here, the center photo, that has a very different growing habit than the left-hand photo. My guess is the one above me was probably in older varieties like Techni, that's a little bit wider, and they just planted them closer together so that they grew together, and then they could prune it to have more of that hedge appeal. But like I said, this is by far the most popular plant that we sell for someone who's looking for privacy in their backyard. And junipers are probably the second most popular. Some people don't like junipers because some of them do get prickly. Some people are sensitive to them, like myself. When I pick up a juniper, if it touches my skin or brushes against my skin, I will have kind of a allergic reaction to it. That's fairly common. So some people like the blue ones you can see in that bottom photo. There are a lot of blue needled junipers. And junipers do a lot better in hot and dry. So if you know that you have a very hot area, it's going to be really windy, junipers are actually probably your better bet versus an arborvitae. They're native to hot, dry spots. This particular plant you will see growing in rocks. So like on the mountainsides or something, that's basically where they are native to. So they're a very drought tolerant plant. They love the sun. They come in a lot of different shades of green and even the blue. So if that's, more your taste, then juniper is probably the better option for you. There's a couple of varieties of Norway spruce that would fit the bill. I'm a little bit nervous about saying that just because these two, so Cupressina is basically columnar Norway spruce. That's the one on the left-hand side. It is going to grow tall and skinny, so it's going to have more of kind of that arborvitae, the emerald green arbs, the way that those look. That's what this Norway spruce is going to look like. The other one is called North Star, so that is the one above my video here. That one tends to be 8 to 10 feet tall, give or take. These are a little bit more picky about water. They they don't want too much, but they don't want too little. So whereas like juniper, if you know that you have a windier spot, a dry spot, that's totally fine. Arbs are a little bit more forgiving, whereas the Norway spruce are not so much. However, they do grow very fast. So this one is nice just because you know you're going to have that area filled in pretty quickly. There's a couple of yews that will be tall enough, and again, be very careful when you pick these out. The two varieties that would be okay for a hedge are Hicks, which is the left-hand photo, and Capitata, which is in the right-hand photo. Hicks is a columnar, so it's a tall and skinny variety. The Capitata is more of a pyramid shape, so you'll maybe need to do the thing where you plant them a little closer together and then just shear them into a hedge versus trying to do this just because they're wide enough at the bottom, but maybe not so much at the top that you won't get the privacy at the top. Both of these varieties are also shade tolerant, so they will grow in full sun. They prefer part shade, part sun, so something between 4 and 6 hours of sun. They will also tolerate full shade. So if you're looking for it at our greenhouses, we keep them in the shade areas. Don't go looking, out by the arborvitae. They won't be out there. But these again grow really fast. They are not deer resistant by any stretch. The deer think this is candy. Same with the arborvitae. If you have deer, don't plant arbs, don't plant yews. They will mow them down to nothing. Or you can fence them off. But these, again, like I said, they grow really fast. They tend to put out a flush of growth in spring, and then you'll notice a lot of times they will send a second flush out in July or so. So you'll get 2 spurts of growth, which probably is why they grow so fast and fill in so quickly. So this is great if you're able to fence them off if you have deer, and you have a little bit shadier spot. And arbs will not grow in a shady spot, so this is definitely a good option for you if you need something in a shady area. And our last option here is Canadian hemlock, which is a native in Wisconsin. The hemlock is always hard for me. I have a lot of people that plant them as hedges. You can see in the photo above me, people will plant them really close and then shear them to be skinnier and like almost boxy like a currant is. I don't necessarily agree with that way of pruning. The photo on the left-hand side shows what they're supposed to look like as they're growing up. The one note I will say, well, 2, they are shade tolerant, which is really nice to have another option besides yews for shadier spots, but they do grow very slowly. So if you want to put these in, I usually recommend that you do Canadian hemlocks like in the back and then put something else kind of in the front or staggered in between them, just so that something else can grow up quickly for you while you're waiting for the hemlocks to get to full size, or even half of their full size. They will be very large when they get, mature size, but it does take them a very long time to get that size. These are also, unfortunately, not deer resistant. I have deer every winter that I have to yell at through my kitchen window to get away from my hemlocks because they think, again, that they're candy. So if you do have these, I would make sure that you fence them off, spray them with, deer repellent, anything, whatever you find that works. But just so that you're aware. But like I said, there's not a lot of options for shady spots. So I've had a lot of people put in, Canadian hemlock and then do dogwoods because dogwoods are shade tolerant. The dogwoods will fill in a lot faster, and when the dogwoods start to decline, they can take them out, and the hemlocks will actually be touching or more of like a living fence. So those are pretty much all of your options for privacy hedges. Hopefully you find something that you like. And if you do have any questions for us, we are more than happy to help. If you wanted to email us, you can go ahead and email us at knagreenhouse@gmail.com. If you would specifically like to email me, put "Attention Jessica" in the subject line, and then I'll make sure to check it. We do have multiple people checking that particular email daily, so I may miss it if my name's not in the subject line. If you prefer to call us, you can call the Verona store at 608-833-5244, or you can call the Fitchburg store at 608-271-3230. And generally speaking, I'm at the Verona store usually like 3-4 days a week, and then I'm at the Fitchburg store 1 or 2 days a week. So you can catch me at either one of those. I do get days off too, because I have my own gardens that I like to putz around and then yell at the deer because they've been eating my stuff, but still. Hopefully you found something in there that's helpful for you, and these are all plants that we should be getting in for the 2024 season, so no worries there. Hopefully you can get that living fence up.